In the following demo, we're going to be looking at the Risk Manager, which evaluates risks to information security assets and provides very strong reporting. Before we go to the Risk Manager, it's important to note that the Risk Manager module draws down upon some of the work that's been placed in this area, in the Getting Started area. And in particular, I want to draw your attention to two particular aspects. One is the policy settings. So you have a risk treatment methodology, asset valuations, and so forth, all of which are set up at this stage. But these policies and settings are drawn through to the Risk Manager. So what in particular you'll see are the impact tables, which are drawn upon, and risk scores, which are drawn upon. Look out for those when we go to the Risk Manager. The other element that will be pulled through will be security objectives. When we do a risk assessment, we need to understand what security objective we are meeting when we're doing a risk assessment. And in this section, you can set up numerous security objectives, but for the demo, there's a good chance that I'll be drawing down upon this security objective to protect information assets from being stolen by staff. So with that in mind, let's go to the Risk Management module. You can see that there are a number of different buttons and the system works from left to right. So let's first of all go to Manage Risk Projects. Now, you could set up a risk project because you've made an acquisition, you've added a new piece of kit, opened up a new department. Whatever the risk project happens to be, you can add it simply by clicking Add, give it a name, and then these fields will open up. For the purpose of today's demonstration, we're going to be looking at the demonstration risk project, which is all about highlighting the features of the software. You can keep some notes, which I haven't done in this case, and you can associate that with a document. So we're going to choose the demonstration risk project. Let's tell the system that this is the project we're going to choose, because the reports that stem from this demonstration will be allocated to this section of the reports, the demonstration risk project. So having selected that risk project, let's go and analyze a risk. Here I have all my information security assets broken down by type, and just beneath I have a risk register. If I go into the risk register, you'll be able to see all the risk management work that stems from the risk assessments that have been conducted here. And that risk register holds active and completed risk management work. We'll go into it later on. For the purpose of the demo, let's choose a particular asset, and I'm going to select a hardware asset. Here are all my hardware assets, and the one that I'm going to be working on for this demo is the server. Let's go to the start. Okay. So the way this works is that, first of all, one of our methodologies that we set up was to look at threats first and then vulnerabilities that can exploit threats. So let's deal with that first, and then we'll work on these separate tabs as the demo progresses. First of all, I've previously set up a number of threats. This particular threat has one vulnerability, inadequate password management. This threat has another vulnerability, sale of stolen information, has this vulnerability here. But I can add more threats simply by going to Add a Threat. And in this case, the system comes preloaded with numerous threats broken down into particular categories. You can search on them, and there you'll have black as in blackmail, or I could choose another example, fire, and that would come this one. So you can search upon them, but the system's preloaded with these threats. You can select a threat and simply add it, and that will build your list. If you want to, you can manage these threats in the ISMS manager just here. So because the threat landscape changes, you may wish to add more threats, perhaps because the threat list that's provided in the system when you install it needs to be expanded. So you can add more threats as time goes by. So you need a threat, and to do a risk assessment you need a vulnerability. So I can add a vulnerability from the list of vulnerabilities given in the system. Again, they're broken down into different categories. You can search upon them and you can select once you've searched. So if I wrote lack again, here I've got lots of threats starting with, or vulnerabilities rather, starting with lack, and I can choose anyone I like and add it. And again, I can configure these vulnerabilities in the ISMS manager. So let's go and select a pair of one threat and one vulnerability. So I'll choose this threat, and that threat has just this one vulnerability, but I could add more. Let's identify the risk now. So the previous work that I've done with regard to this threat and this vulnerability is, what's the risk? Well, I've written that the business could lose valuable data because there's a vulnerability here. And similarly, what's the outcome that I'm looking to achieve? Well, greater control of the information assets. The source of this threat I've indicated as internal staff acting deliberately, but it could be any of these others. It could be more than one, or you could change absolutely the sources of the threat in the setup manager. So these are not fixed. You can vary them. So I'm going to save that, and as I do so, I've got a history log. So I've got a date and time. This is the risk, this is the outcome, I'm the user. This is the threat, this is the vulnerability. I've got a complete history log of everything that I've done. Let's assess the risk now. And first of all, you'll note that this information here is carried across from the previous tab. The system has taken a number of impacts and given them a score. And the scoring is calculated here. So if an auditor says, how did you calculate these scores? You can point them towards these calculators. Now, in the setup, we didn't provide a weighting for any of these scores, so these are all unweighted, but these are inherent risk scores. And we've got a total unweighted score of 15, comprised of these impacts, which we can give a priority to. We can call that high or rate it how we wish. This has led to us having a moderate impact, but this is just the start. It may be the case that you or your consultant says, actually, the effect on service is not going to be none. It could be a partial loss of service, in which case that score has gone up from 15 to 20. So it's up to you to decide what the score is. Alternatively, if the litigation claim or fine means that there could be criminal suits, this could be catastrophic, and that score goes up again to 29. But it isn't. It's at this at the moment, but this is just a starter, and that's why it's flexible, and it's for you to decide what score you're comfortable with and how you wish to progress and manage this risk. In this box, you can explain why the impact values are chosen. In this case, it's the actual experience of the company, because there is a threat and there is a vulnerability that's being exploited. These impact values, this is why the likelihood is chosen, because the impact values reflect the actual experience of the company. So what we've done here, and you can change these, okay? But what we've done is we've said from the impact table, there's a likely event, and this could occur within 1 year. And events that occur within 1 year in our risk score table say that events that could occur within 1 year and that have a score of around 8, they should be treated. If you felt that it was a very likely event to happen, or rather it could be imminent, then that score goes up, in this case to around, say, 14, which gives you the option of transferring that or treating it as well. But if we stay with what the system has suggested and keep it as likely, then we can treat this, and we can explain why this risk treatment has been chosen. And it's been chosen because the situation is too serious to ignore. So these are the comments that have been put in, and we've got a history log of all of this that's gone on. So we've got all the impacts across here. And as we move the system along, we can see the treatment that we're going to adopt and the reason why. And again, the threat and the vulnerability. So we've got a complete history of all the activity. So because we're going to treat the risk, let's go to the next stage, which is treat. And the action that we're going to take, so this is previous work that's been done, but we're going to take an action. And you can see that treat has been highlighted. So we have now been presented with some suggested controls that relate to the server, because we're treating a server and the server's got certain properties. If we didn't want to choose any of these suggested controls, then all the controls starting at 511 are presented to us if the suggested ones aren't to our liking. But we might as well choose a suggested control. So let's choose 832, disposal of media. That's a control that might be useful. And the security objectives, which I pointed out before, need to be selected, because while we're doing this, we've got to meet a security objective. So the security objective that we're going to meet in this case is protect information assets from being stolen by staff. Who's going to do this work? I'll allocate it to Jeremy Martin. Let's give a title for this work. Could be anything, but this is appropriate, I would suggest. And that's the action to be taken, but you can put down more detail when you use the system. And so here I have the work that I've just allocated. I've decided to implement this control, 832, and I'm doing the work, but we haven't started doing the work yet. We're going to start the work fairly soon. This is just the start of it, allocating the control. So let's assess the residual risk and see if allocating this control has had any impact upon the scoring. So we'll assess the residual risk now. Well, it seems that the inherent risk before, which was at 15, has had quite a good reduction in risk to here, 5 points. So it's had a 10-point reduction because it's now a residual score of 5. So the inherent scores which have been carried over from the previous tab are these, because they're in red. But these are the ones that have changed. So what were they before? That we could have lost £50,000 before, but now that's our maximum financial loss. And indeed, at the same time, we could have had adverse customer interest, but now we've contained it within the company. So that's a good implementation. So this now means that the risk has moved from moderate to insignificant, and we can put in some explanation as to why that's approved. And also it's gone from likely to very unlikely. And a very unlikely event, according to our likelihood table, is once in a decade, so we can explain why that is. And that score has gone right down from, I think it was around 8 before, to around 1. So we should really accept that. So having accepted it and saved that, we can see a history log. These are the changes, and if I scroll across, we can see that this has been accepted, but we need to put in at some stage why, so it's up to us to do that. So consequently, how do we treat the residual risk? Bearing in mind that we've accepted it, the action is accept. So if we've accepted it, then we don't get presented with further controls because we've accepted the risk. If we hadn't accepted the risk and wanted to treat it, then we would be presented with further controls which could reduce the risk even further, reduce the inherent risk. So what we would then do here in this case is we would say, okay, this is a security objective we've met and it's been allocated to a particular person. This is the action, this is a risk owner. So that's how we would run this through. And the next step would be to analyse the risks. Sorry, beg your pardon, to track the inherent actions. That's the next step. So where are we up to? We're here at the moment because we haven't started the work, but this is the work that we're going on to protect the information security assets. But let's start it. and we'll start it next week on the Monday, and we'll finish it a few days later. And let's just say that we've started the work. We'll save that. We could give some evidence as before. So and we could put in a SharePoint reference, something like that. Okay. So with a view of it. So we're 25% in. We've got an active piece of work going on. So let's see what this looks like in the reports. So if we go to the reports, then we can look at the risk manager reports now. And if we go to the risk reports, we can see that in the first risk project, in our inherent risks, we've got a few inherent risks in here. These are the reports on them. I think this is the one because we were working on this server asset. And if we scroll across, we can see that we need to protect these assets and internal staff have been acting deliberately. So these are the threats, these are the vulnerabilities, and we're treating them. If we want to, we can produce a report or link straight through to that particular asset, okay, which will be in here. So that's one way of looking at the reports. Another way to look at the risk manager reports is to look at the risk actions. Again, we're in the first risk project. Let's look at the risk actions in progress. Okay, so we've got these two that have been allocated to myself, and this is the one that we've been working on because we're 25% in. It's to protect the information security assets. That's the work that we've been doing. Let's go back to doing this piece of work. And here we are, 25% in with our evidence. And this, if we look at the history log, is to protect that. We haven't got a finish date yet. If we had a finish date, we could just move this up and it would be a completed piece of work. And that's the actual finish. And then it should be moved over to here because that is actually complete now. So what you can see from the system is you've got a complete risk management solution with a risk register with all the work that goes into it, and you can manage all your risks and review them in the risk manager reports. The system is very comprehensive, and just as I've shared my screen with you, or you're looking at this demo, you can share your screens with an auditor. They don't have to travel to your location. You can share it remotely and he can look through all the system and absolutely see everything that goes on with it. I hope you like it. Good luck using it.